You're listening to Infinite TBR, the podcast where we try not to buy more books. I'm Smack.
And I'm Gabi. Spoiler alert! We're going to avoid major spoilers, and when we can, warn when we're going to discuss a particular book in detail so you can avoid that part of the episode. You can also check the show notes for time-stamped flags identifying potential spoilers.
So in our last episode, we talked about our exploits at the North Park Book Fair.
Yeah.
And we haven't even touched...
Oh no.
What happened at Book Crawl this year.
That was a while ago.
It was a while ago, so we're not going to go too in-depth. And it's best not thought about anyway. There was a lot of damage.
There was a lot of damage. Gabi did way more damage than I did. I was very reasonable this year. Which is why the book
fair
absorbed
was all of your unreasonableness.
You did.
So, but we are going to hit the things from Book Crawl that are most noteworthy. So most of Book Crawl, like, it's not like we've gotten around to reading any of them, so it's all...
Lies! I have read one book. One whole book from Book Crawl.
Honestly impressive.
I know. You were pretty impressed when I told you. But also...
I have technically read kind of 1.5, I think, from Book Crawl.
Explain.
So, I was just going to say, when we were book crawling, I was in the middle of Fire by Kristen Cashore.
Yeah.
And which is the sequel to Graceling. And while we were out and about, I just got Fire and Bitter Blue.
Oh, so you were partway through a book you had...
Yes,
okay.
So I finished Fire with my new purchase, and then I read Bitter Blue.
That counts.
So there we go.
So you've read 2 books. That's great. Good job.
I think that's it.
What else did you get that you were, like, looking forward to?
I picked up a copy of The Space Between Worlds, which I had read, and everyone should go read it. That's by Micah Johnson.
Johnson, I think? Yeah.
And then I picked up a copy of Nettle and Bone
Yes.
by T. Kingfisher, which we've also talked about. It's great. Go get it. And then also by her, I picked up Bryony and Roses, which I haven't read, but
I did read when I was cat sitting. I read that one.
So I was going to ask you what you thought.
It was very similar to the Robin McKinley
Ooh.
Beauty and the Beast. It was very similar.
Rose Daughter or Beauty? Because Robin McKinley wrote 2.
She did write 2.
And one of them is very great, and I don't know so much about the other one.
I loved both of them.
Okay.
But I also haven't read them since I was about 13.
Okay. Beauty is one of my mom's and my favorites of all time.
It's like that one. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, I know,
you're
just saying. But yay, that's
it's
exciting.
Like one of them. It was like reading Robin McKinley up until a certain point, and then you were like, oh, this is definitely T. Kingfisher. It was good, though. It was fun.
But I think those were the ones worth mentioning for sure. And I mean, Bitter Blue was awesome.
Yeah.
So
I haven't read that one since it came out, but I do remember being very impressed.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was very well done. Very different in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the romance they set up. I shouldn't say that, spoiler. But her growth and like through that whole book was just really interesting. She was really cool, and her just kind of finding her space as queen was just really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my book crawl today.
I got
highlights so far.
Yeah, I've got a couple that I'm still very excited to get to. One of them is Kindred by Octavia Butler. It's her vampire story book.
Nope, that's Fledgling.
No, you're right.
Yep.
Fledgling. I found
that one for you.
You sure did. Why do I keep calling it Kindred?
Because you've
that's
been
like the
meaning to
famous
read
one.
Kindred.
Yes, that is
forever.
That too. And I got Lent by Joe Walton.
Oh yeah.
Which is, it's about this monk that actually did live in Medici, Florence.
I didn't know it was like based on a true...
Well, a true guy, but like...
a true dude.
Yeah, but they're like demons and all sorts of other stuff. And it was either while she was writing it or right after it was released, she sort of came out with the Tiffany problem, which I've explained in the past.
Yeah, explain that for our listeners, because I thought that was really cool, and it also makes me mad, and I don't like it.
I know. It's
Makes
sort
me
of
grumpy.
it's about how much you can trust your readers to understand and accept, and how far their suspension of disbelief will go. So Tiffany sounds like a very 90s name, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's a very American, modern name. But Tiffany is a nickname for Theodora. And Tiffany was one of the most popular nicknames in, 1500s Italy? Yeah. Like, the Florentine Renaissance, one of the most common names for women named Theodora was Tiffany. But if you name a character in 1500s Florence Tiffany, no one will believe. Like, you'll jolt all your readers out. They'll all hate you. It'll be chaos in the
They'll
pages.
hate you personally.
They will. So you can't use a historically accurate name from that time.
That infuriates
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, you were, the first time I told this to you, you were actually, like, quite
Put out.
upset.
Yes. I want to, I like knowing that I can learn from my reading, and to know that I could be so misled.
Not misled.
But I mean, I'm
but,
never going to get... I mean, it's not like you would ever anyway. Like, there are a lot of... You always have to take anything
yeah.
with a grain of
All
salt.
fiction.
But
to know that the author does not trust you to follow what is actually true.
not even that, like, the author doesn't trust me, but the idea that, like, I would never be able to learn from, reading fiction that was a common
That was
nickname,
a
just
very-
because in the publishing world it's not accepted as
A thing.
a thing. Something about that just makes me really mad. Very frustrating.
It's a like a deliberately missed opportunity.
Right.
Is what it feels like.
Yeah.
But I really love that tidbit.
It's like something we've done to ourselves. Like, it's
It's
something we're...
self-inflicted.
Yeah, it's self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Flail,
As you
flail,
sit here, like, throwing your arms around.
It's one of those things where the more I think about it, the madder I get. It looks like a very straightforward...
Anyway. The other ones I got Old Man's War by John Scalzi, which I haven't read. That's like a SF classic that I haven't gotten to.
The one, The Mysterious Galaxy.
Yeah.
I talked you into.
Yep. Don't know his name. I don't know. I only know 2 people's names in Mysterious Galaxy. But, thank you.
Don't thank him until you've read it.
Well, it's a classic.
Oh, is it?
A modern classic.
Sure.
Maybe I just know too many SF people. I don't know. Anyway, so there was that one.
Right.
There's Fledgling. There's another one. But the 4th one is the one I have read. It's called Silence for the Dead by Simone St. James.
Woo.
And the titles of her books, for most of her books, are weird. Don't necessarily make sense. Silence for the Dead, I guess you could metaphorically get there. And then there's one called The Other Side of Midnight, which is cool, and it's a line in the book, but it's not as...
You wouldn't pull it for the title.
Yeah. And then there's another one called An Inquiry into Love and Death.
Good title.
That was dumb. It was because the love interest was a cop.
What?
Anyway, she started out writing her first 5 books, including Silence for the Dead, took place in the interwar period, or like immediately after World War I.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've read anything past like 1923 or something. And they're all technically paranormal romances, but mostly it just means there are ghosts and a love interest.
He's not a ghost. Or is a ghost.
No, the ghost is never a love interest.
Okay.
Like it's not necromancy, stuff like that. So the one I haven't read is called The Haunting of Maddie Clare, and that one won like 3 awards.
Oh, wow.
I own it. I haven't read it yet. But Silence for the Dead, I didn't realize was by the same author. And I really liked that one. That one, there's an asylum in like the middle of nowhere, 3-hour drive away from Newcastle in northern England. The main character, her name is Kitty. She's on the run from her abusive father. She thinks her brother is dead because he went off to war and no one ever heard from him again. And she is flat broke. She pretends to be a nurse to get an interview at this asylum for shell-shocked soldiers.
Say that 3 times fast.
Shell-shocked. Just a little bit. And during the initial meeting, the opening scene, the head nurse is like, I know you're not a real nurse. It's very clear you're not a real nurse. You've definitely impersonated this person's handwriting to get a reference. She's my cousin. I know what her handwriting looks like, but I'm going to hire you anyway because we need people and we can't keep nurses. Which is like big old red flag for employment purposes, but she has nowhere else to go. She's out of money. She can't even go back to London. And if she did,
vulnerable population.
exactly, everybody's playing on, I mean, not everybody. The story is about dealing with trauma, whether that trauma is PTSD. Well, I mean, the trauma is mostly PTSD.
Right, but war-based.
Yeah, war-based or domestic
shock.
abuse.
PTSD
And
war.
like it gets sort of graphic in the domestic abuse, but it really clarifies that her PTSD is just as valid as the PTSD of this guy who didn't do any fighting, but he had to go through the battlefield after it was over and try to match body parts so they could be sent home. And so he is very messed up.
Buddy.
And he's being possessed at certain times, which doesn't help.
Way to slip that one in there.
It's an asylum, right? Of course it's actually a new asylum, so nobody's died of unnatural causes at the asylum, but it was like a private family home of this weird Swiss family with like a German sounding last name, and they all just disappeared one day after they'd fired all their servants, and where did they go?
Dun, dun,
Yeah. So and there's definitely at least one ghost, so did they all die in the house? If they did, where are their bodies? And in the middle of this, Kitty is like trying to figure out how to take blood with a needle, and she's like, okay, so the needle goes and screws into this part, and she finds like a 101 nursing, like nursing for dummies book, and she's like, oh thank God.
Amazing.
And through it all, like, she gets flashbacks to like her father just absolutely being horrible, and then one of the patients, he's like this patient 16, nobody knows his name because he's like a war hero.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody in the entire government wanted anyone to know that a war hero
Sounds right.
had suicidal ideation and tried to kill himself and ended up in a nut house because all of the patients there have just been shipped off by their families because they don't know what to do with them. Some of them drank till they got violent. One guy had lost both his legs and is just so depressed he can't get out of bed sometimes, even with help. But like, it's a fascinating look at how PTSD was viewed back then. And I just loved it, and I really liked the two main characters. I liked all the other nurses. I read it twice. I read it, and then I finished it, and I started over immediately, because I knew if I did
That's the only way.
That's the only way I can reread books anymore, and I knew I wanted to reread it. And then I went through our local library system, and I picked up Lost Among the Living, which is where the main character's husband was a RAF pilot who his plane was downed during the war, and she's been like living as his aunt's paid companion because she has no family and she's got nothing else and she's just heartbroken. So Lost Among the Living.
How was that one?
That one, there were parts of it that I really liked, but I did not read it twice.
Okay.
You know. And then The Other Side of Midnight I quite liked.
Okay.
That was the one I read immediately after Silence for the Dead. And in The Other Side of Midnight, the main character is like an actual psychic. And the whole story starts several years after her mother was, quote unquote, proven to be a fraud because her powers, she was also a psychic. Her mom, her, and then her sort of high-flying flapper friend are the only 3 known psychics in the whole world. And as she got older, her mother started to lose her powers. And so her mother was still doing seances and stuff, but she had the main character, like, behind a beaded curtain, like, summoning stuff. And then they volunteered, basically, to be proven or disproven by this, like, science society of guys getting together, trying to find ghosts and everything. Which is about as cringe as it sounds. But the best part of that book was you learn that there's this interplay between the 3 women that happened before the book started and completely out of sight of the men who were administering these capital T tests. So, like, it's very much a story about what women say and mean to each other in ways that maybe aren't visible to people who are outside the relationship. And at one point, the love interest finally, like, gets his shit together and figures out, like, what had been happening. And he's like, I had no idea. You had to go through so much. And she was like, yeah, I know you had no idea. We all knew you had no idea. It wasn't about you.
Oh boy.
So I really liked that.
That does sound good.
And the one that they didn't have at the library that I had to go back to Meet Cute to buy was an inquiry into love and death, where the main character has to go off to some small town in England outside of London and settle her uncle's estate, sort of. Like, he'd been renting a house, so he was a ghost hunter, which was, like, quite disreputable.
Oh yeah, this is the one you had when we met up. I read, like, the first page of. I was like,
that.
her parents sound suspicious.
Oh, yeah!
Or I thought the lawyer sounded
The lawyer
suspicious,
sounded suspicious.
and you were like, no, her parents are
parents,
suspicious.
yeah. It was good. That one had the scariest ghost by far. It was great.
Oh, you did like that one?
I did like that one.
Okay, I thought that was the one you were kind of about.
I mean, there were parts I was about, but, like, the ghost bits were awesome.
Okay.
Were, like, A+.
Okay.
So, the only other one I'm in the middle of, The Broken Girls, which is super different. There's still a ghost, but it's dual timeline. In 1950, at this girls' school for last chance girls, and then 2014, when the book came out, this woman who's a journalist and whose older sister 20 years ago had been found dead on the, like, softball field of the school that had been closed down for 30 years. So there's this big gap between the 1950s timeline and the present day, but then also...
And there's that murder in the middle.
There's multiple murders in the middle.
There's multiple murders in the middle.
And so I haven't gotten all the way through it, but it is interesting to, like, watch these two timelines come together. Not so much in terms of plot yet, but, like, you can see it being seeded in, which I always enjoy.
Yay!
Yeah. And it's quite different, but it's...
In the way you like so far?
I mean, like, it's more like a straight-up suspense or thriller story than, like, a paranormal thing. I would like some more ghosts, but, like, that's okay. I don't need those.
Needs more ghosts.
It's very well written.
So we're on the Simone St. James train.
Yep.
Are you going to keep going with her other one?
I'm going to read the Maddie Clare one.
Okay.
Her first one.
The one that won a bunch of awards.
Yeah, because I own it.
Oh.
It's an ebook.
Okay.
Sorry.
Immediately preempted.
I almost, when we were at Miku today, I almost leaned over to, like, pick it up. I know where it is on the shelf, and I almost threw it at you, and I was like, well, I'll wait till I read it first.
Probably for the best.
Just in
considering
case.
my pile from today.
But if I love it, you will be the first to hear about it.
Yay! I was also going to laugh at you because you said that you only read one of your book crawl, right?
Yeah.
And
then I went through her whole backlist.
You read one of my book crawl books.
I did, yeah.
But you also read The Witch Boy by Molly Ostertag.
Is that your book crawl?
That I also got during book crawl.
No
so you've
way!
read more books from my book crawl than you've read from your book crawl.
Well, I had a whole week at your place.
That's true.
With
I haven't had my
only
week at your place
your
yet.
mean-ass cat to keep me company.
My little demon.
Little monster.
Who's so mean to you? It's embarrassing.
It's okay. I didn't even pull her tail this time. She just doesn't like me. I don't pull her tail.
Would never.
I touch it sometimes. Just give her a little poke.
Yeah, just to see.
And only when Gabi's around.
It's fine when I'm around.
A lot of things are fine when you're around. When you're not, the world is hell.
So I think that next we're just going to go over recent reads since the last time we talked. You mentioned all your Simone St. James.
That's all my recent reads.
I mentioned Kristen Kishore. We're actually about to start Winter Keep, which is the fourth.
Oh boy.
And we were laughing because every time she does a sequel, she, like, adds a kingdom. Kind of. Or she did with Fire, like, she had, like, the one kingdom, or it's like the sixth kingdom, or the seven kingdoms,
right.
or whatever.
In the original.
In the original. And then in the sequel, all of a sudden she zooms out and it's like, oh, there's a secret kingdom with a slightly different magic system. And there's like no interchange between the two except for one person. And it's fine. And then the third one, those worlds start colliding and you're like, oh, now we're going to continue to explore these two very different...
Yeah.
And then the fourth one's like, no, actually we're going to zoom out again. Add on more countries.
That sounds cool.
No one knows about, but it sounds like they're gonna be. I think they're like telepathic animals in this one or something. And I'm very excited
like
about
sentient,
that.
like
I think
language speaking.
Double check what. I remember thinking it was gonna involve sea creatures and got excited. People speak to telepathic sea creatures, adopt telepathic foxes as pets, and fly across the sky in ships attached to balloons.
Yes, that sounds pretty great.
Yeah. And it's interesting and funny because there's a character in the first book that's like the throwaway, dumb male foil to the love interest. And he's the one who, like, has a thing for the main character, but is, like, stupid about it. And then they have a big falling out because he's stupid. And we were doing this with our high school book club thing. And we were
being you and our number one
Yeah.
fan and...
Yep.
Others.
And others. And we were just like, this guy's so stupid. I'm so glad he's out of the picture or whatever. And it's just such a headache.
No, is he in the fourth one?
He comes back in the third one.
Really?
And is like, has grown up, because it's like, 10 years later.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And he's like, yeah, I was a stupid kid. But it's funny because Katza, the main character of the first book, holds grudges like no other and is still just mad at him. And he's like,
She's
yeah,
like Marina.
she's still mad at me for, like, stupid shit I did 10 years ago because I was a dumb kid. And we think it's so funny that, because you never see that type of male character go through any growth
at
or
all.
anything.
Yeah.
He's just, like, there to serve a purpose and then disappears.
Gone.
Yeah. So it's very funny. And now he's, like, one of the main characters in the fourth book. And we're all like, I didn't think we'd see the day where we'd be like, team, get it! So I'm interested to see where that goes. I'm excited for that. I think Laura read the first 2 or 3 chapters already and is delighted.
Oh,
Enchanted,
good.
I think she said.
Enchanted, my goodness.
And I'm like, oh boy, but I really gotta finish Master of Iron
By
first.
Trisha
By
Levenseller.
Trisha Levenseller.
Tell me your thoughts.
Alright, so Blade of Secrets is the first one. Master of Iron is the second one. I'm like 100 pages from the end. They're delightful. It's just like a fun adventure.
Yeah.
Fun adventure with a really fun YA cast of characters. And they're all total goofballs. And there's like really serious high stakes stuff going on, but it's not useless angsty stuff.
Right.
Like they have some tension, some conflicts, but it's all reasonable, it's all well addressed. It's all like she has a sister and they're very different and they're very codependent and they're like navigating their differences while on the run from this very dangerous warlord.
So what happens in this first book? The premise.
And I think you brought it up on the podcast before briefly. We have talked about it a little bit, but what happens, to recap, Ziva is a magical
smith. She makes swords. She makes weapons. Metalsmith?
Blacksmith, thank you. I'm just here like, it's not Bladesmith. That's what she is, but that's not it. They call her Smithy all the time.
Because I don't think it's actually blacksmith. I mean, like, she does some blacksmithing. But, like, that's, like, iron.
That's what she...
Is that all she works in?
I mean, mostly. It's like, they get iron from the southern mountains, and then they mix it with charcoal, or heat it with charcoal to make steel.
Okay.
So
I don't know if that makes sense.
I don't know. I'm picking up a little bit about blacksmithing. Like, she'll throw lingo around. I'm like, she researched this.
And had to put it in there.
Yep. Once you
I have to know this, you do too.
So she can speak to whatever she's making as she's smithing it to bestow a magical property upon the item that she creates. So she can do it with like tools but mostly she creates weapons, and she's an artist. That's one of the things that comes back to you often is like her whole thing is like she does the magicking and she makes the blades, but her love is in the creation and the artistry of like creating the details on the hilts and things like that. And sometimes she's very purposeful about it and creates abilities on more or less on purpose, but her magic isn't very precise and is sometimes more accidental than not. And one day she gets a commission from this not retired general, but the general for the old monarchy, who's no longer the general because the monarchy's hasn't.
You are making this so much more
I
complicated.
am sorry.
Okay,
Okay.
nope. I get to try now.
But you did last time.
Did I?
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I can do it fast. So Ziva has anxiety. She lives with her sister. They're the only family. And at this horrible party, she meets this very, like, chill woman. And they talk about swords. And Ziva really likes her. And so she accepts a commission from this woman who turns out to be a warlord who wants to take over the entire planet. I mean, we don't know the planet, but, like, the whole continent.
Yeah, the whole country.
And
Continent, yeah.
Ziva only figures out that she's not a great person when Ziva accidentally makes an indestructible super sword and then decides she can't give it to the warlord because she'll take over the world with it.
Yep.
And so Ziva and her sister hire a mercenary and collect a scholar dude to come with by accident, and they go on the run.
Everything
with the
is
sword.
accidental.
Now you can continue.
Okay.
Tell me what you think about the portrayal of anxiety.
Like, I don't think I've ever seen a portrayal of anxiety in a main character before. So, like, in those terms, very different. Just, like we've read a couple of these now recently where the main character isn't neurotypical. And I really like getting that representation in there. The way she spirals, I really like. It's really interesting, and I recognize a lot of those same patterns.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll start spiraling.
Oh no!
Before, not as badly as she does, but I'll be like, oh, if this were me, I would start thinking about this. And then the next paragraph she'll be like, what? Because the anxious paragraphs are often set up with these, like, series of questions that she's asking about herself in the situation. And I was like, oh, what if they interpret like this? What if they think this? And then she goes through the exact same questions that, like, I know I would be like, and I'm like, oh.
I might be familiar with this.
La.
She deals with it way better than I ever would. Like, that is what makes her a hero.
Yes. And some of that is when the book starts out, and she's in a good situation to manage anxiety in the beginning, because it's a relatively small town. Her profession...
She's respected.
Her profession lends itself to isolation. She has her sister to manage all the social interactions, and she has a really good relationship with her sister. So her sister helps mediate a lot of the things that would cause Ziva the most anxiety. But Temra's very different, is very much a social butterfly, has these, like, career goals that are very not compatible with Ziva's.
Because Ziva
her
just
view
wants
of their
things
life
to
together.
stay the same,
Yes.
pretty much.
And Temra's it just wants adventure, wants to go out and see the world, and that's something that, Ziva has to come to terms with. But yeah, I thought it was...
Especially when she has to go with her.
Yes! Yep! And then they get thrown into this situation, and I like that the way panic attacks are presented, I like that they don't just happen when it's convenient for plot purposes. It very much feels as if, like, they don't always happen predictably. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, she's, like, so stressed right now and therefore a panic attack happens. Like, often she can get through the most stressful situations, and sometimes there's no noticeable trigger. She can maybe recognize, like, what caused the spiral in the first place, and then the second book gets into, like, some of her developing coping mechanisms as she's, like, grown and met more people, and I thought that was really interesting, too. Because you can recognize a lot of the, like, behavioral cognitive
Yep.
therapy
Yep.
stuff that you're supposed
Because
to
she
like.
had, like, even if she had regular access to a doctor, like,
Mhm.
they don't have psychiatry. Like, in general.
Right, in fantasy world.
Yes. There's no, Xanax or
Right.
Ativan or whatever.
And at one point relatively recently in Master of Iron, she brought up how, that was one of the other interesting, like, dynamics introduced is in the second book, the idea of her forge as a safe space where she, like, there's always been a place of, like, love and safety and security for her, gets ruined by the events of the beginning of the second book. And later in the second book, she has to reclaim it.
Yeah.
And I really liked that progression of I have to, like, relearn and reestablish something that used to be a love and passion of mine so that I can But she goes into how she didn't realize how much the exercise of forging really, like, helped her deal with anxiety. And that made me think of all the runs I go on to deal with my anxiety. But yeah, and they're, like, the thing I love the most, I think, about these books, though, is the way the characters interact with each other.
Aren't they the best?
They're so great.
Even when they're being dumb.
They're, like, everything they do is reasonable, but they're also, like, in the most delightful ways, so dumb. And, like, misunderstand each other in ways where I'm like, yeah, I see why but also, is the
Right. My favorite part is when, at the beginning-ish of the second one, the love interest tries to be, like, all noble, self-sacrificing, and she's like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
The worst part is, at the end of this first book, he makes a decision that to basically save her instead of her sister.
Mm-hmm.
And she's furious about it. And at the beginning of the book, he makes a decision to save her sister at the expense of his own life.
Right.
And she gets pissed about that too. And he's like, what do you want?
Trying!
I can't win! I thought you wanted me to sacrifice myself, and she's just mad no matter what he does.
It's so delightful.
And
there's the part in the first one
the part
when he makes, like, a very reasonable decision.
He just hesitates. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, oh, we gotta go save Tamara. And he waits for 2 seconds to be like, should we have a plan before we... And they're like, how could you hesitate for a second and hold it against him for, like...
Pages and pages and pages.
Everyone does. And he's like...
I love them so much.
They're so great. Their dynamic is just hysterical. Oh my goodness.
So, that had been sitting on my desk for a long time.
Yay!
And I'm so glad I finally got to it. And I love them so much. And then also there's this great play with anxiety.
Yeah.
And how to function in the world.
And I love seeing the tension between her and her sister because it's always from a place of love. Because sometimes, you get the sister dynamic where they're at each other's throats. Mm-hmm. And it's never like that. It's all just, we want different things.
Yeah.
If I get everything I want, that's not compatible with everything you want. And we have to try and find that middle ground and learn how to be happy, but have, like, get out of this codependence we've kind of established for ourselves. And the interesting dynamic they set up with Temra as the younger sister, who's the fighter of the two,
right.
Who, like, learns to fight, and then gets so frustrated because she wants to protect Ziva for once, and is so frustrated and mad that Ziva's always, like, the older sister, and is always sacrificing herself. And Ziva gets really upset about her sister being in danger. And it's this fundamental tension between the two of them, where Ziva just wants to pack her sister into a box where she can be safe, and her sister wants the freedom. It's like go on adventures, but also like be the one who saves her sister for once.
Because their dynamic at the beginning is more like because they are on their own. It's before they collect their found family. And Ziva's the one who has always taken care of Tamara. Tamara deals with customers and talks to people and exchanges money, whatever. But Ziva's the one who had to go out and get an apprenticeship.
Like when she was 10 or something.
And had to pay her way out of apprenticeship. And Tamara didn't make money. You know, she went to school, which is what Ziva wanted.
Yeah.
But, like, it's a very parental relationship instead of sibling. And then the whole book turns into a healthy sibling relationship. I love these
And the
books.
way the stakes escalate through the whole duology is really well done, too.
Very, very well plotted.
And they're well connected.
Mm-hmm. I remember you were texting at some point in the first one, and you were like, they're about to reach their destination, but I'm not at the end of the book.
It was like a third
Yeah.
or fourth, and that was like their first destination, and I was like, oh no.
This is not gonna end.
This is not gonna go the way I thought it was gonna go. I saw I thought the whole book would be their journey to that one destination.
Right.
Nope. They go to a lot of places.
Well, I'm glad you liked them so much.
Yeah.
I know you're not done with the second one.
Oh, they're great. I don't see how it could end in a way that wouldn't be satisfying. It's not that kind of adventure story. And it's just like the pure adventurousness is also, like, it's a very questy type thing, but it's like, oh, we go to a place and there's a new problem and a new adventure. And it's usually smaller scale than the bigger overarching one.
Right.
And a lot of it, is them figuring out their own inner dynamics, too. So it's really well balanced, and you, have this, very stressful plot thing, and then they gotta figure out one of their emotional things, and then there's a bigger plot thing that they deal with, and then they gotta deal with the emotional fallout from that, and kiss and make up, and then...
I love it.
So
I love
good.
it. I'm so glad you liked them.
Good. I also think it's very funny that Secret Eater was the big evil sword of the first book. Was created because while she was forging, Kellen walked by and she looked up and she was struck with lust for the first time. And again, is like...
That was another part I really liked. She's Grey Ace.
Yeah.
And that was done very well.
I love seeing that rep. That very much spoke to me.
Especially because he was so confused about it. And she was like, no, you don't understand. Statistically, it's gonna be you or no one.
Never felt this way. Will never feel this way again. And I just think it's so, and I was telling you this earlier too, it's so funny and distressing to me, coming back to her anxiety and how it unfolds in the plot, that she has to learn how to manage her anxiety in these extra stressful situations. But everything that especially triggers her anxiety, social situations, the concept of having a romantic partner, all that, a lot of those cause huge problems in the first book. Every time she branches out and tries to do something outside of her comfort zone, it just comes back with awful life-threatening consequences.
Yep.
And I'm like, your anxiety's not gonna get better. Her first party ends with that, the kid ostracizing her sister and getting them basically run out of town. And then she, meets this warlord and is like, oh, we actually have an okay rapport. And she ends up being
the giant big bad.
And then she's looks up and has, sexual attraction for the first time and accidentally creates a sword that's gonna destroy the world. Maybe sexual attraction isn't worth it. And that just, kept happening. I was buddy... No wonder you're a wreck. How are you not more of a wreck?
That's great.
Delightful. Highly recommend. What else have you been reading recently? Or is that pretty much all Simone St. James?
I read the Boy Witch ones. Those are fun.
Oh, yeah.
There's not a whole lot to say about them. They're very cute. I think the first one's probably the best.
Okay.
The first one's called The Boy Witch.
The Witch Boy.
Oh, The Witch Boy. By
Molly Ostertag?
Yeah. You're good at this.
Sometimes.
So it's a middle grade graphic novel, and it's this family of magical people, and the boys are always shapeshifters and the girls are always witches, and the main character, Aster, is a boy, is told he is a boy. He's raised as a boy, but he wants to be a witch. He doesn't want to shape change or anything. And then there's this family secret that comes back to bite everybody in their ass, and he helps save the day.
Yay! Spoiler.
I know. And then the second one is strengthening the friendships that he made in the first one, and then there's a new person who comes to town who has magic but doesn't have great control over it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know. It's bad.
Uh-oh.
But only as bad as a middle grade
Right.
is going to get.
Right.
And the third one is sort of the gelling of this group of friends into his larger family. And, like, they are all very important to each other and finding their groove type thing. And I know, they're really sweet. And they're quick reads. It was very nice. When I was at your place reading, I would read a novel. I read like 7 books that week.
Yay! I watched you go by on Goodreads and I was like, she's having so much fun. My cat might be terrorizing her, but at least she's reading some good books.
I had a delightful time at your place.
Good.
I read a book a day, pretty much.
Yeah.
I'd get up in the morning, I'd walk to a nearby bakery, and then I would eat a croissant on the beach.
That's the move.
Yep. And then I would go back to your place and say hello to your demon and read a book, and then I'd read a middle grade graphic novel as like a palate cleanser.
Yeah.
And then I'd read another book, and then I'd read another one of your middle grade graphic novels as another palate cleanser. It was really great.
So perfect.
It was delightful.
I'm so
Because I
happy for
couldn't
you.
do book after book after book after book.
Right.
It was too much.
Yeah.
Because it was in a
Makes
day.
sense.
That was all I did.
Yeah. There's only so, as much as we love reading, there's only so long you can stare at words on a page without a break. Some sort of break.
To a different genre.
At least. With at least, like, pictures to break it up. Speaking of as bad middle grade can go,
Uh-oh.
we finished, this is still the high school book club with Laura.
Oh,
and
yeah,
Laura,
the
et cetera.
Troll
And
King,
yeah,
right?
we finished The Great Troll War by Jasper Ford.
I don't think you have to say both
I
F's
don't think
twice.
so, but it makes me laugh every time when I do. That's the fourth and final Last Dragon Slayer book,
Mm-hmm.
which I think I've mentioned before. I think came up in one of our summer bingo showdown, throwdown, offs,
Yes, it
whatever.
did. Whatever we call it.
And we were talking about this a little bit earlier today, but those books, he strikes a very lighthearted, humorous tone. Very Terry Pratchett-esque, but middle grade. But the content is very dark and quite a bummer, especially if you think about it for too long. Like, there's an orphan-based economy. This whole, like...
What?
It's like the Ununited Kingdoms is the setup. So first of all, it's like all UK references that go right over my head. But so I have to look up a lot of places that they bring up, and there are these in-jokes with these UK historical figures that I simply am not familiar with, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And like jokes about Cornwall, and I'm like, I know that's a place.
I know it's a place they make jokes about.
Right, apparently. So, like, little things like that, but they're all, like, dystopian fantasy kingdoms, these ununited kingdoms. So, the king is a selfish...
Dickbag.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she is 15, 16, and runs the Wizardrical company. They outsource wizards to do jobs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual manager disappeared, so she just does it, because she's like, orphans are basically indentured servants in this world.
Great.
And there are these very occasional troll wars where they send everyone in the country off to go fight the trolls, because the trolls eat people and they're trapped behind these walls and they want that land back. Or they just feel like fighting. And then all the parents die and leave all these orphans behind.
Jesus.
So then they all end up in orphanages, and the orphanages farm them out, basically.
What?
And that's like background world building. So he'll just like drop little details on, and it's like set up, and again, it's very lighthearted, humorous tone. But you think about it for 2 seconds, you're like, this is a bummer. And the first book, she's tasked to go slay the last dragon. Like, she's like a chosen hero type thing, so she's the last dragon slayer. But she's trying to figure out whether she should, because there's a question of...
Intelligence?
Well, they know that the dragons are intelligent, but there's, like, a question of whether they're evil or not. Like, whether she... it's weird. There were some weird things about the first one. And then, in the end, you're not even sure whether she should or not. And then... Future Gabi here. Spoilers for the last Dragon Slayer series by Jasper Fforde run until about the 51-minute mark. So now's the time to fast forward if you don't want spoilers for that series. Spoiler alert! Yes! And then, but because she does, the way the dragons work is so, in this world a long time ago, the mighty Shandar made a deal with all the kingdoms, and they said, we'll give you a bunch of gold if you take care of the dragon problem. And the dragon, like the typical medieval dragon thing, they'll pick people up and
fly off with them,
yeah. Whatever. And so they want the dragon problem dealt with, and Shandar's like, okay. And the way Shandar dealt with it is he basically trapped every individual dragon in their own bubble somehow. I forget the details. And the reason he did that is because if dragons die of natural causes, they're dead. If they are killed, they kind of mitosis.
Oh my god.
And create, like, so when she kills the last dragon, he turns into 2 babies. And so it was this, like, and for some reason he couldn't tell her that directly. And there was a whole question of whether the dragon was moral or not, and whether Shandar was moral. Like, she was trying to figure out why they had done it in the first place, and what the setup was, and trying to figure out the underlying magic, and people were trying to, like, give her endorsements and get her advocacy as the last dragon slayer, so they're trying to, like, get her on ads and stuff.
That's
like
weird.
That kind of, there's some, like, weird things, and sometimes it's just funny. And sometimes it's just sad. Like, what? So she kills the last dragon slayer after her, like, basically pet dog gets shot by another character. So that's the thing, is, like, it'll be funny and lighthearted, and then something that's a huge bummer happens. And you're like,
wow.
Why? And then, like, the second book was more balanced and was my favorite at the time. And the third one was in this, like, weird anarchist kingdom.
Okay.
Which was kind of fun. It was things like people go, I forget what it's called, but it's like thrill seeking, but like they get odds on their likelihood of dying. And it's like, if you go, you have a 50% chance of, like, I will get you through this kingdom alive. And those are good odds. It's one of those, like, you go for the thrill seeking and the chance at certain death kind of thing.
Right.
But you're, like, very likely to die if you go, like, hang out in this kingdom. But it's, like, almost like a theme park thing.
That's weird.
It's so weird. And they go for, various reasons. And then they, like, do their whole quest and have their shenanigans and things happen. And they come back. And the last, like, 5 pages of the book, they find out that their home kingdom was overrun by trolls and everyone's dead.
What?
So they have to deal with that in the 4th book.
And everyone's dead?
Most everyone's dead. Like, one of the side characters in the 3rd book is the princess. And they go back and they find out that the castle was destroyed and her family's dead. She's the only one left in her family. And wow. So it's things like that. But the 4th book was like that, where you have this, like, very jarring effect of this juxtaposition of this lighthearted, humorous, we're having a fun little great adventure!
With, like...
And pets are dying, and it's war, and how are we gonna deal with this problem with math? Very bad math, Jasper Fforde is bad at math! But the climax of the 4th book was so powerful and emotional.
That's nice.
And ended so well and was still really sad. It made me cry, but it was also really good. I'm really mad about it.
You sound kind of mad about it.
But it was really good. But I'm still mad. I'm in this I'm trapped in this circle. I'm mad about it, but it was good. But I'm mad about it. So, I don't know that I would recommend that. Like,
really?
I don't know that I'd recommend it as a middle grade.
Right.
Because it's just sad. I don't know maybe, like, the age group it's meant for would be able to handle it better than I could. Maybe, I don't know.
Like, it wouldn't bother, though?
I don't know.
As much?
Maybe they wouldn't... I wonder if it's one of those things where if you, like, really realize and internalize what's going on, you're like, you know when you're young and you kind of idealize the orphan condition kind of thing? Like, if you're maybe still caught in that vibe a little bit, maybe it's less...
I don't know.
Hey, this is kind of awful.
Pet dies, though.
Yeah, that thing's kind of sad.
I'm not going to read it, but it sounds very intriguing.
Yes.
I am intrigued, but not enough to read it.
We sent you some passages. You got the vibe. There were parts that were very funny.
But there were also parts where everybody died. So.
Yeah.
Rocks falling, everyone dies.
And sometimes it would be very abrupt, too. Like, a couple pages and all of a sudden this person... And she had, like, a almost love interest who, like... spent so much of his magic in the third book that he aged himself to death to save their lives.
What? Jesus Christ.
A lot of this is spoilers that I'm gonna have to play around with later,
Oh
but
my God.
yeah.
Well,
And then my other recent reads worth mentioning are the Slouch Witch trilogy, which was just
by Helen Harper,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
which is just delightful. And if you just want a fun, witchy romance,
It's pitched as like she's lazy
Yes.
and has been pulled into this adventure that requires too much effort.
yes. And
And
the
they,
love
however-
interest is the exact opposite.
Yes. Very
It's very fun,
serious,
very
in
serious.
charge,
First,
by the book, give it your all.
goes to the gym every morning at dawn. And
That
the
was,
way,
like, the funniest.
yeah, the way she gets out of things,
It's
just
just
I
by
love
any
her.
means necessary.
Yes. And I love, like, every time her inner dialogue, which is more effort, dealing with this or figuring out a way to not deal with this, and her just weighing which is more effort, which is very fun.
I also really liked how, like, as the trilogy goes, you learn, like, why she doesn't see a point in bothering.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that to be so moving.
Yeah. It's just great. It's just fun. They were just fun.
They were pandemic reads.
They're any
Well, they were my pandemic
Oh,
reads.
yes. They would have made
Your
great.
vacation
Yeah, they're my
reads.
vacation reads. Your pandemic reads. They're great for pandemics and vacations.
Multi-purpose.
Yay! And I read Let the Mountains Be My Grave by Francesca Tacci.
I think so.
Say it?
I don't know how to say it.
Which
What did you think?
It's a perfect novella. I was really worried.
I
'cause
was so worried.
It's about someone who's like the patron of an old Etruscan goddess in
Of
the mountains of
snakes and
Italy.
healing.
Yeah, during World War II.
And they're called the partisans. I didn't...
Yeah, I learned so much about.
Yeah. I didn't know what I mean, like, I know what a partisan is
Right.
in modern parlance, but, like, a partisan was, like, an Italian guerrilla fighter.
Yeah,
Which is pretty freaking cool.
and I have not often considered the political dynamics of being in Italy during World War II and all the different
Because
tensions
Italy's
that
not
were
where
going on.
anyone focuses
Right.
on, like, retellings. It's always Germany
Yep.
or UK. Sometimes France.
Yes, so
That was very
So
interesting.
very interesting, very different point of view. And then I was really stressed and worried at the beginning because they're fighting Nazis and the main character
Turns
kind of
out-
has a death wish.
Yep.
And he has his love interest is a really hard communist and is trying, and you find out they have this really sweet moment where he's like, the reason I basically keep trying to convert you to communism with me so you have something to live for because I can tell you have a death wish. And
That
it's
was
so sweet. And I was
Like,
so
this is
stressed.
really messed up, but
But it
absolutely
was so
adorable.
great.
I loved it. That's probably one of my favorite Neon Hemlock novellas. Neon Hemlock is the publisher.
So if you're looking for something sweet and shoot some Nazis, and
Yeah!
extra dimensional horrors,
Yeah!
eat it. And then I read American Born Chinese by Jean Wen Yang.
How was that?
That was really fun. I was
Was
sending you
it?
guys some screenshots. That was the one. That's a graphic novel with the Monkey King.
Oh,
who
yeah!
learns
God,
about
that was weird.
It was so interesting. There are 3 parallel timelines, kind of. One is about this Monkey King god in Chinese folklore who hears about this party that the immortals and the demons are all having. And he's like, a party, I'll have a party. Shows up at this party, and they're like, you can't come in, you're a monkey, ha ha ha. And basically gets laughed out the door, and he gets pissed.
Rightfully so.
Beats everyone up at the party, and then goes down this path of trying to become more human, basically.
Yeah.
And, like, become more powerful, become more worthy, like, deserving of respect of his fellow gods, and wants to be able to just basically beat everyone down and then get rid of everything that makes him a monkey in exchange for this kind of respect. So there's that storyline. There's a storyline of this. He starts off in 3rd grade, I think. This kid who moves from somewhere in America to somewhere else in America. And it's just about normal kid stuff where he's an Asian kid, and all the, like, subtle and maybe not so subtle racial macro and microaggressions growing up as a kid, and the insensitivity of kids and the, like, brainlessness of teachers and other adults and stuff, but also very normal middle school kid dreams and desires and stuff, and growing up and stuff. So he has this tension with himself and his own racial identity. And then there's this 3rd storyline that's this really painful racist television show.
Oh my god.
So you're just getting screen caps of this, like, white high school kid whose Chinese cousin, I forget his name, but his Chinese cousin comes to visit and, like, messes up his whole school life because he's just, for, like, very bad Asian stereotype reasons.
No.
And just makes a fool of himself. It's just this, like, very goofy, awful Asian, like, painful stereotype type thing. And it's everything worse about, like, and you're like, I could see this as an American TV show back in, like, the day.
Yeah.
And wouldn't
Not
have
that long ago.
And the way those 3 storylines end up intersecting and interweaving, because they're all very similar in sort of their core themes and this, like, idea of identity and what you're willing to change about yourself to serve other people, kind of, and their perceptions, and, like, what you're willing to sacrifice for that, and some very interesting things going on, and I really like how they all ended up interweaving, and so many moments just caught me by surprise, and I just found myself laughing, and then, you know, you get these several scenes where you're just like, ow, 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 ow. But yeah, that was a really, really great graphic novel. So those are all my recent reads worth noting. Was there anything else you wanted to?
I started a bunch of stuff. I haven't finished much of anything.
Oh yeah, you're reading a bunch of things.
So I keep starting books. Finishing would be so satisfying, but I haven't reached that point with many of them yet.
We want to read what we want to read.
I know. Well, Claire Legrand is going to be in Mysterious Galaxy soon, next
so
week.
You have to finish that.
Well, I don't have to finish it, but, like, I have Claire Legrand's, I got an advanced reader copy of A Crown of Ivy and Glass, and its main character is this girl, the youngest child of a rich family, and they're known for, like, their fancy magic and their richness, and she's allergic to magic, and it makes her, like, horribly ill.
Oh no.
And there's this, like, it's not a convent, but it's like an order of warrior nuns, sort of.
I, by the way, appreciate that very hard thunk when you turn
I
that
know.
over.
It's a paperback, but it's, like, chunky. It's very sad. I'm like, because it's an arc, I don't think it's gonna hold up super well, but, like, it's real nice while it does.
You need to read it fast enough that if you know you love it and want a real copy, you can get that one, and then that one's signed.
That's too fast. I can't. I can't pull that together.
I guess it's not necessarily your move either, like, once you read it.
Right. It's mine.
Yeah.
Can't have it. Mine.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she's allergic to magic, and there's this order of warrior nuns who take, like, a daughter. It's usually the youngest daughter, but she's too sick to be a magic warrior nun. So they take the middle daughter, and she loves her sister, the middle sister, with like this desperate, guilt-ridden, just absolutely adores her sister.
How mad is the sister that
the sister
she got roped
is
into this?
very graceful about it. She's one of the best warrior nuns there are. But like, they turn into, this isn't much of a spoiler. I'm only 40 pages in.
Fine.
So this isn't really a spoiler. But they're fighting, there's like this mist barrier around the civilized world, and on the other side of the mist are these monsters that try to get through. And so the warrior nuns turn into these like I think they're literally harpies with like talons and feathers and scaly skin and terrifying eyes. And the main character sees her sister turn into one for the first time. And so there's this knee-jerk horror and revulsion for this girl that she just fucking adores on every other level. And like, this girl lives in guilt. She got her second sister sent to the nunnery to be a warrior. She is allergic to magic, can't help with her family stuff. There's all sorts of stuff that is going on, but she can't help, so she doesn't bother to do anything. So she spends her life being a socialite. And she's really good at that, but she sort of hates herself for not being able to like do anything else.
I was really on board for the harpies, and now I'm like,
I know the harpies are going to be so cool, but yeah, so far it's a lot of angst, and I think the self-loathing is more like depression.
right.
And she has crazy panic attacks. And at one point, like, even this early into the book, 45 pages, her best friend is like, I'll help you with this one thing, but you have to promise to talk to someone. There must be someone else in the world who gets panic attacks. They call them the panic. So it's pretty clear what it is.
Right.
What
could this be?
It's kept secret. So, like, she doesn't know if anyone else has ever dealt with this.
Right, how do you...
And
Who's gonna
doctors
just tell you?
all use magic, so she can't, like, they'll make her sick.
Right.
So, like, it's very interesting because she wants magic. She wants to be normal. She wants to be cool, whatever. And she's just super depressed and anxious. But I am only 40 pages in.
I like how we're both reading books about anxious people and very different vibes.
That's true, they are very different. They call this Bridgerton meets a Court of Thorns and Roses. I barely know how to say it without calling it ACOTAR.
Just call it ACOTAR.
A Court of Thorns and Roses. So
ACOTAR.
it hasn't gotten great reviews online.
No, it's getting like
Yeah, it's gonna get
good
but like I haven't read
For
any
whatever
trade reviews, and I do know that the published date got pushed back like multiple times, and by like very weird. Usually, when a published date gets pushed back, it's like by a season. Like it goes from a spring book to a summer book to an autumn release. And this one, it was supposed to come out in like mid-May, and they were like, okay, at the end of May. No, wait, in the beginning of June. No, wait,
like
the end of
very
June.
Specific
Like,
little logistical
weird,
problem.
yeah, weird stuff.
Huh.
And there's stuff going on behind the scenes in the publishing of it that. So, I mean, at least I'm going in with a very low expectation.
Right, which helps.
So, yep.
Always go in with low expectations.
If you expect the worst, no one can hurt you.
That's a healthy way to go about life.
Yep.
Reading and life.
Okay,
This has been another public another PSA.
No, that was a bad PSA.
That was a bad Don't listen.
Our other PSAs are excellent.
Yes. I shouldn't start making them sarcastic because our other ones are actually legitimate. So that's what you're reading.
So I've got
One
that
of the many
one.
things you're reading.
I have like 4 nonfiction books I'm in the middle of, and because I'm writing a story that's a retelling, sort of. It's like very different at this point, but it's a retelling of the Bacchae from Euripides. Basically, I'm just trying to do a lot of research to cover my bases, but everything I'm reading is incredibly dense. And
dry?
Some of it's interesting, but like a lot of it's only tangentially related in that it explains the macro, which is what I need. But oh my god, it's a lot. And it's dense, and it never ends. And sometimes it takes me like an hour to read 2 pages on one of these.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god. So, I keep starting books.
Right.
And I'm also in the middle of Broken Girls by Simone St. James.
Oh yeah,
Oh, and I started Maeve Fly. Maeve.
Oh, right!
Fly, which is weird.
You sent us, like, the first page of that.
Yeah.
I remember when that crossed my radar I don't remember why it crossed my radar, but I remember looking at it and the cover and the blurbs and the summary.
The cover is...
And I was like, I think Smack is gonna love this. Looks weird.
It is weird as shit. It's super... I'm like... It's an ebook, so I've been reading it when I leave the house on my phone. So I'm only like 2-3 chapters in, but basically this woman lives with her comatose... CJ Lead is the author. She got her MFA from Columbia and now lives in LA. The main character works at Disneyland. And she plays... What's the blonde ice princess? Elsa. You have nibblings, I don't.
True.
And she doesn't have any contact with her parents. And she lives with her grandmother, who's comatose and dying, in this big 3-story house built into a hill. And it's just them. And I have suspicions, but, like, I am only 3 chapters in, so I don't want to go too... Basically, it's weird as shit.
I like how nothing you've said so far is particularly weird. And you're just like...
The prose is...
She works at Disneyland. She has a comatose grandmother. They live in a 3-story house set into a hill. I have my suspicions.
About the grandmother. Because, like...
But boy, is it weird that they have a 3-story house in LA. Yes, that is...
That's the weird part. They have a nice house.
Everything else is normal.
She works at Disneyland, and the opening scene is her and her BFF, who plays the other ice princess character.
There's another?
The one...
Her sister?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anna. Okay. Elsa and Anna.
She's not an ice princess.
Whatever.
Let me break down the entire
present. No, we're focusing on the weirdness. So the opening scene is the main character and her friend, Kate, being princesses at Disneyland with this little girl and this little boy, and the little girl is just, like, squealing and excited, and the main character is, and this is the first person, so she's, like, talking directly to the reader, and she's telling us about how she's watching this, like, 5-year-old boy stare at her friend's chest, and then reach out to grab a boob as his mother takes a picture of all 4 of them, and then she makes eye contact with the dad, who is, like, weirdly like, yeah, that's my kid, and sort of like sees her seeing him do that, and is like, well, what are you gonna do? And then she goes home to her no, she doesn't go home. She goes on break, her and Kate, and they do lines of coke in the break room. And then, see, this is a weird book. And then their supervisor comes in, and she's very, like, portrayed as goody two-shoes, but her whole thing is that she used to be Elsa. And then her boobs got too big to fit the costume, so now she's not allowed to be Elsa. And she's really, really sad about it. She's a victim. That's the word they use. And then she goes home and talks about these weird, like, expensive cactuses that are, like, planted in the front yard, and they can cause, like, rashes and blindness and death. Nobody knows that, but I know that. And then we go in and see her comatose grandmother. Like...
I don't understand what this book is about.
I'm like 15 pages in. It's not a long book.
Right.
But, like, it's weird as shit.
Are you enjoying?
I don't know.
I don't know yet.
I don't know yet.
Too soon to tell.
It was... The first chapter was badass.
Yeah, that first page was like, ooh.
But then you get to the part with the little boy grabbing your friend's boob. And
yeah, that's weird. That's weird bad.
Yeah, bad
weird in a bad way, yeah.
And, like, the lines of coke and the hating her supervisor for her giant rack is weird.
Yes.
But also feels forced.
Right.
I think this is, like, her persona that she's put on for the reader.
Right.
The back summary keeps talking about Jason Bateman, so there's going to be dead and blood and death. Probably quite graphic. Probably semi-sexual. We'll see how this goes.
Jason Bateman.
He's American Psycho.
Okay.
Do you know that? You don't know what that means.
I, like, recognize it, but...
He's a serial killer.
I'm
pretty sure.
Serial killer?
No.
Oh.
No, it's a movie with Christian Bale. You don't know who that is.
I do know who
you do know that is. You don't. That guy. Okay, so that guy.
We got somewhere.
Is like a businessman who kills people.
Okay.
It's based on a book. I really hope that's all right. I know the rest of the world knows what American Psycho is.
That will be the reason they all stop listening to this podcast.
Damn,
we
women
messed
don't
up
know what they're
American
talking about.
Psycho.
If this is what turns you off,
We didn't want you anyway.
I was gonna say you're in the wrong spot, but like,
What a weird
Okay.
place to come to for your American Psycho content.
oh, we woke the dog. Oh. All right, should we sign off? What do we sign off with?
Well, Mysterious Galaxy Summer Bingo is starting. We just found out today that they are doing it. We found the sheet. So, that's coming up. So here's hoping.
Yawning.
Here's hoping you take a nap and then you go to your nearest indie bookstore and find their Summer Bingo.
Because a lot of them are doing
A lot
it
of them
these
are
days.
doing it. And if they're not, your library probably is.
Exactly.
And if they're not, Mysterious Galaxy is, and you can look it up online.
MYSTGALAXY.com.
Yeah!
Mist Galaxy.
Mist Galaxy.
This has been another episode of Infinite TBR. You can find us on our Twitter at Infinite TBR.
And we are individually on Twitter as @WhatSmackSaid and @Gabalodon, which is like Megalodon, but Gab in the front of it. And you can find all our show notes at infiniteTBR.com. If you have book recommendations for us or questions you want answered during the podcast, feel free to email us at itbrshelf@gmail.com.